Yeah, as I already mentioned, Vikram, the 19% looks doubtful to me, especially because it envisages a growth which itself seems doubtful. I think the overall economic situation, both global and Indian, is muted, and you have as Rajiv mentioned, there are issues around forex, etc., forex volatility, and so many other uncertainties, which has kept the entire situation, the economic situation, under duress. So, in that context, that 19% looks doubtful, which I have already said. Right. And the other one, which is not really the tax one, is relating to the disinvestment target. So, as Mr. Godrej said, one can't have the ministry say that don't sell it at this particular price. At the same time, I think we also need to be realistic and see that if the capital market is as muted as it is and it's not reacted very well currently, that again is going to put pressure. But at least on the tax revenue, I think it looks a little optimistic currently.
Okay.
Yeah. So I have a point to make on the tax revenue for this year, that is 2012-13. And what this budget at a glance shows is that tax revenue went up from 170,000 crores last year to 206,000 crores this year, which is why you've got a 5.2 fiscal deficit. Now the latest...
You got it also because expenditure came down from
No, this is just on tax revenue. I'm only talking about tax revenue. Now, the latest numbers that we have, which is put out by the Ministry of Finance, that between April and December, tax revenues, gross tax revenues were up only 15%. This is showing you that's 20% for the entire year. That means we have to have a 30% increase in the next 2 months or 3 months for this thing to be credible.
Okay.
So I just don't know where these numbers are coming from.
Okay, we're not quite sure where the numbers are coming from. Mr. Godrej, let me get your sense very briefly on the growth part of this. Is the India Inc. has been really complaining a lot about the trajectory that this government has been on, and it all looked as if it had changed from September onwards. Are you seeing enough in this to make you confident that the government is going to continue to press the accelerator on the changes that are required?
Well, clearly a lot needs to be done. I think clearly, unless investment projects are cleared adequately, the formation of the CCI under the Prime Minister is extremely important. We must ensure that projects go through. We must ensure that environment clearances, other clearances, in some cases Defence Ministry clearances are not held up. If we can manage to do that, clearly investments will grow and that will lead to growth. But we must understand that we do need the changes in the governance, which the Finance Minister also referred to in his budget speech, are required to, in addition to the plans he has suggested, in addition to the expenditure plans he has made, we need to see that clearances from the government are made in time. If we are unable to do that, I am afraid the growth targets may not be achieved.
Okay, Kiran, quick reaction to that from you. Kiran, can you hear me? Okay, we seem to have lost the line. I'm going to take a very quick break. We'll come back and continue to throw that question to everyone else. Reforms, reforms, reforms. That's what a lot of attention has been focused on, and what the government is doing on implementation of policies and governance in general. Any signals on that front, and also any signals on some of the bills that the government has to get through. We'll turn our attention to those when we come back. Welcome back to our coverage of Budget 2013. So we've spent the last segment really taking a look at all the big stories, big numbers, how it's going to stack up. Now let's just quickly get everyone to run through any of the specific individual proposals that has really caught your eye. I mean, all sorts of things are going to happen, from mobile phones being more expensive to big cars being more expensive to allowances for infrastructure, all sorts of things. Mr. Godrej, any specific policy or two that you think really stands out for you in this budget?
Well, I think I don't know the details, but I understand that there are some amendments in terms of investment made from places like Mauritius, which have caused difficulty. I think they should be clarified. I think we should be clear. We shouldn't do anything in the budgets which affect the sentiment or the perception of investment in the country, as happened in the last budget. This time also I believe there is a clause. I haven't had time to study it in detail, but I think some investors are concerned that that particular clause might change the taxability of the investment. That is one of the reasons I understand the stock market took a bit of a hit today. So I think we should be clear that nothing negative comes into the budget which can affect perception.
Okay, I'm so glad you made that point, Mr. Godrej, because we did actually try and get some clarification on this. That really is the issue that you're talking about, which has been causing some concerns, especially confusion over possible taxation in Mauritius. Now, Parthasarathy Shom did come out and clarify at some length about this. Let's just hear that clarification. I think it could be helpful.
Retrospectivity is simply because it will be effective actually after the thing, it would have been effective from May, after the Finance Act is passed. So instead of that, it will start from the financial year. So everyone is expecting it, and that is not a big deal. It is not retrospective in a very fundamental way, that it was not anticipated. Now, what is the issue? The issue is also non-existent, but I think there may have been some confusion. First, the issue is that a TRC is simply acceptable for as proof of residence. That remains, there is no confusion. However, it is not sufficient for any matters regarding interest, royalty and dividends, which are all covered in the respective DTAs that India has with different countries.
Right.
So the attempt to bring into the circular, which was already done last year, was from the DTAs. We also want that to be reflected in our own act rather than only individual DTAs.
Okay.
Now this year they have brought it into the act, and that the separation, perhaps when it was in the circular it was not noticed,
right.
But now that it's in the act, everyone has noticed it. But that has to be separated. Maybe a clarification should be issued.
Right.
Okay, that clarifies things, I think, but I must confess, I did lose him somewhere there. Ketan, perhaps you could help the rest of us decipher that a little bit. Does that clarify issues? Does that sort out the issue that Mr. Godrej was referring to, or does that make things even worse?
Yeah, okay. Let's just step back. There are two separate issues. One is, Mauritius or maybe even Singapore on the one hand, and one is the generic issue. I think last year what happened was that
Ketan, I have to say, before you clarify and we get even more confused, perhaps you could just interpret it also for us. Should people be worried or should they not be worried? Is it retrospective tax again?
No, so I'll come to the retrospective tax in a minute, Vikram, but let me first step back and just explain what happened last year, what is the continuity this year, and then link it up with Mauritius so that hopefully it becomes clearer. Last year what happened was that a clause was introduced that in order to claim the benefit of a tax treaty, there would need to be a tax residency certificate. And for a moment, let's forget Mauritius. This clause was not there earlier. This year what has been clarified, quote unquote clarified, or at least put in the law, is to say while that is a necessary condition, it is not enough. And I think what Dr. Shom was trying to explain was that in many of the tax treaties, there is a clause which is primarily for royalties, fees for technical services and interest, but mind you, not for capital gains, and I'll come to that, to say that the resident, or rather the claimant of the treaty benefit, should also be the beneficial owner of that income. So for example, if there is a company in the US which puts its a claim through Netherlands by floating another company there and claims a beneficial rate of withholding tax on royalties because India Netherlands has a lower rate, what I think the law is now trying to clarify is that just the tax residency certificate won't do. Let's park that for a moment and go to Mauritius, which I think spooked the market. As you all know, and as I'm sure all the viewers know as well, insofar as Mauritius is concerned, there was a circular issued by the CBDT as long back as in 2000. It's circular 789 of 2000, which essentially said that in relation to capital gains derived by a Mauritius company which is exempt under the India-Mauritius Treaty, a tax residency certificate is, so to speak, enough. Not the exact words, but that's the import of it.
Okay.
So I think that circular, so long as it stands, and today it is not withdrawn, I think this will not impact, this change will not impact that, but yes, unfortunately, it has created confusion.
Fair enough, Ketan. We get the drift of it, and I think we are reassured. I think we are reassured. Can I just quickly, perhaps all of you, before we wrap this up, with all of you at any rate, maybe 10 seconds, final words on the budget. Mr. Godrej, why don't you go first? Final quick words on the budget from you.
No, I think overall, I think the budget proposals are welcome. I think the containment of the fiscal deficit is extremely important. That has been done well. I think the expenditure plans are welcome because they are growth oriented to my mind and inclusiveness oriented and will promote growth. We've got to be very clear that there is no negative perception created. If there is any chance of that, it should be clarified immediately and changed immediately if required.
Okay, Kiran, final quick words from you.
Well, I think no negative signals from the budget, and I really hope that, as I say, the devil is in the timely implementation of all the fiscal measures, and I really hope that we can move into deemed and automatic approvals, because that is going to ensure timely implementation of anything we do.
Okay, Rajiv, final quick words.
I think that a lot is at stake for this finance minister and this government. He has stuck his neck out to remain steadfast in delivering 4.8% next year. He really needs to do that. What worries me is that he will perhaps be able to deliver on that promise, but by cutting back, if necessary, primarily on planned expenditures and not sacrifice non-planned expenditures for electoral reasons. And that would be a suboptimal outcome. I hope it doesn't happen, and I hope that he's able to protect growth-oriented planned expenditures and yet deliver 4.8. But 4.8 he must deliver.
All right, Mr. Rathi, before I come to you for final words, I just want to welcome Raghuram Rajan joining us right here in our studio. It's a pleasure, Raghuram, to have you, and we're just going to take you through and try and understand the philosophy behind the budget with you in just a couple of minutes. But Mr. Rathi, final thoughts from you.
Well, I would like to make 3 points. Number one, this budget has almost everything which people had been asking for. So the success of budget would like on 3 words, and all 3 are execute, execute, execute. So I like to see everything which is said in the budget to be executed. What makes me extremely happy is finance minister commitment to defense expenditure. There is no point of economic growth if you don't have security. And I presume and I hope that defense will include internal security, which is a cause of concern for many of us. Third thing, I will take a minor disappointment. See, what we need is growth. What we need is savings. And our saving rate has been falling year after year. As compared to 50% of China, we are very low. I think it can still be corrected. There should be huge encouragement to deductions, financial investment deduction should be given in the tax laws. Limit of 1 lakh fixed long time back is just not adequate.
All right, sir. Fine. Mr. Rathi, we get your point. I'd like to thank you all so much for joining us. It's a pleasure having had you. I do want to turn now to Raghuram Rajan, who's with us right here in the studio. If you could just tell us a broad philosophy